The film genre horror has been one of the most watched genres throughout film history. Although there are contradicting views of this category of film, horror is still one of the most prevalent and popular genres within modern-day human culture. The reason it is so beloved and profound is that the movies of this genre hold an underlying truth beneath the layers of fiction and fantasy. To take a deeper look into the truth of horror movies, we will be looking at Paul Schrader's First Reformed, released in 2017. First Reformed tells the story of a pastor of a small church, Reverend Toller, who struggles with his faith and morals after having an unnerving experience with an extreme environmentalist and his pregnant wife. The weight of reality and the fears presented in horror films is what makes them so heavy and why people are attracted to them. When people watch horror movies, they are better able to understand their fears and concerns with the world around them. Now, what is horror? According to Studio Binder, horror is a genre of storytelling intended to scare, shock, and thrill its audience. The premise of horror is based on the emotional response of the person watching, as does any movie. Comedies are supposed to make a person laugh, romance movies make people feel in love or happy, and horror movies are supposed to make a person feel scared or nervous. Let's apply this to Steven Spielberg's Jaws, released in 1975, which is about a man-eating shark terrorizing the beaches of the fictional American town Amity Island. When one watches Jaws, the viewer has a sense of nervousness about what is in the water around Amity Island. With John Williams' score and Steven Spielberg's direction of not showing the shark, the viewer is on the edge of their seats wondering what is about to happen. Where is the shark? What will happen to the poor girl we see swimming above us? It makes us question what we see and fearful of what is about to happen. On the other hand, First Reformed has a more internal conflict based around the idea of what happens after death. We see Reverend Toller struggle with this idea as well as his own beliefs. Although the movie does not have many jump scares, the audience continues to watch in awe as he pours Pepto-Bismol into his whiskey or wraps the barbed wire around his chest. Throughout the movie, the viewers watch him slowly start to break down as he writes his ideas down in his journal and questions his own morals and thoughts. After the film, the viewer can't help but question their own morals and thoughts. What will happen after death? Is the human race doomed? How do I feel about this? They're the same unnerving questions like the ones for Jaws, albeit more existential. Now the question is, why? Why do these things affect the audience so much? From here, we must examine the historical context during the development of horror films and how societal fears during those times affected their stories. Jaws and First Reformed have come out more than 40 years apart, yet they contain the same horror movie formula, the formula upon which is based on the current state of society these movies were born from. Going back to the Jaws example, Jaws was released in 1975, right after America pulled out of the Vietnam War. At the time, Americans were still recovering from the tragic events they were subjected to through the clips of war shown on their television sets. Previously, people had never experienced war to such an intimate extent as they did with Vietnam, with the help of television broadcasts of the events happening overseas. There was a fear of how close the war felt, even though they couldn't see it in front of their eyes. The same anxiety can be found in the characters of Jaws. The people of Amity Island fear a man-eating shark they cannot see until it's too late and bodies are piling up on the beach. As for First Reformed, it was released much later in 2017. Around that time, many people were growing concerned about climate change and how it was going to affect us later on in the future. It's become one of the biggest civic issues in the past 3 decades. There is a fear that we will be the cause of our own demise, and there is a sense of helplessness as we progress forward and see that there is an inevitable end whether we cause it or not. First Reformed displays the struggle of real people trying to come to terms with death and how it affects their own morals and beliefs, or vice versa. In my opinion, being able to see my own fears and anxieties in a horror movie is what makes it scary. Sure, the jump scares and dramatic music can add to its ambiance, but there's something more daunting and heart-pounding about seeing one's worst fears play out on the screen before their eyes and understanding that those fears are very much rooted in reality. Now the question is, why do people watch horror movies? Health's article, Why Do So Many People Like Horror Movies? 6 Reasons We Love Being Scared, actually lays out the answers to this question quite simply. Out of the reasons presented in the article, I want to focus on one in particular. Essentially, people watch horror movies to help cope with their own fears and anxieties. It helps them deal with the uncertainties and hard-to-swallow parts of life. Personally, I watch horror movies because I can cope with my anxieties about reality by watching horror movies where my fear can be controlled. I exist in a state of terror behind the safety of my screen, so the fear doesn't seem so frightening. My mentality starting a film goes along the lines of, it's a movie, so it can't hurt me. There's no existing consequence to the worry I feel while watching the movie, so there's a comfort in knowing that when the movie ends, I won't have to fear it anymore. When people watch First Reformed, they can cope with their fears in a controlled state where they do not feel the consequences of what is being portrayed on screen. There is a comfort in knowing that the anxiety one feels while watching this film will end in a matter of minutes, and the terror in Reverend Toller's story is merely fiction. To put it simply, horror movies are a way for people to escape the fears of reality and cope with them through a facade of fiction and fantasy. When people watch horror movies, they are able to better understand their fears and concerns with the world around them. With the initial suspense and shock in horror films, they are emotionally drawn to the films. The parallels between what is going on in the world and within the film only create a stronger connection between reality and fiction. The reason why people watch these movies is to try and cope with what is going on in the real world through the comfort of knowing that the film story is fiction. When people can face their fears without actually experiencing them, it can help them better understand their fears and perhaps conquer them in real life. When they face their fears in reality, they can better understand why those fears exist in the first place and realize how they can move forward in life dealing with its explanation.